Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Committee on Revenue and Economic Development. Will our Secretary please proceed to call the roll?
Senator Cruz Crawford.
Present.
Senator Steinbeck.
Here.
Senator Stone. Acting Chair Dunyate.
And I'm here, and please mark Senator Neal absent excused. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to today's Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development. I would also like to go ahead and welcome folks from Carson City, Las Vegas, and virtual. Today we have two presentations. We have a presentation from the Cannabis Compliance Board, which will present on cannabis regulation. And then we also have the Department of Taxation that will also give a presentation on cannabis taxes. We are in a good position right now for this week. We're going to be hearing presentations from different folks, and so today is focused on cannabis. Thursday we'll talk more about fuel index, more from the DMV and from RTC. So we have a pretty robust of agenda items. So before we go to that, I do have a few housekeeping announcements. The first thing is, of course, as always, we'll have at the end the option for public comment, and we ask for folks to limit it to 2 minutes each. And any materials that we're using for our presentations today can be found on the Nevada Electronic Legislative website. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with our first presentation, which is with the Cannabis Compliance Board. So please begin when you're ready.
We ready, Chair? Excellent. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is James Humm, James-Humm, and I am the Executive Director of the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board. Before we jump into this, though, I'd also like to wish Chair Neal a fast and speedy recovery. Joining me today is my Chief of Administration, Steve Gilbert, to my far right, our Chief of Health and Safety, Kara Cronkite, and our Chief of Investigations, Dave Staley, is behind me. I've said it in my last presentations, and I'll continue to echo that sentiment. Whatever measure of success I will have in this appointment will be because of them and their incredible teams who serve the state with dedication and unrivaled efficiency. Some quick background on myself and the agency. Governor Lombardo named me to lead the CCB in December of 2023, whereas in the prior 6 years, I had the pleasure of serving the state in various roles at both the Attorney General's Office and the Governor's Office of Economic Development. During my 14 months at the agency, we have already, and I know we will continue to accomplish many more great things. Now, if you will, I'll walk you through the presentation. So the timeline of Nevada's Cannabis Compliance Board. The board was established through Assembly Bill 533. The CCB consists of 5 board members appointed by the governor. AB 533 also created the 12-person Cannabis Advisory Commission to study cannabis-related topics and make recommendations to the CCB. In 2000, Nevadans voted to legalize medical use. In 2015, the first medical marijuana establishment opened. 2016, voters approved ballot question 2, which legalized adult use or recreational use. In 2017, recreational sales began in Nevada. The state's cannabis program transitioned from the Division of Public and Behavioral Health to the Department of Taxation. 2019, Governor Sisolak signed AB 533, as noted above, creating the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board, which at the time was modeled after the Nevada Gaming Control Board. In 2020, the state's cannabis program transitioned from DOT to the CCB. Our mission statement. This is what guides the agency. The Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board governs Nevada's cannabis industry through strict regulation of all areas of its licensing and operations, protecting the public health and safety of our citizens and visitors while holding cannabis licensees to the highest ethical standards. What does our board do? So the duties and responsibilities, as noted prior, consists of 5 board members, all appointed by the governor. We hold regular monthly public board meetings, host ad hoc regulatory workshops, review and approve final licensures, transfers of interest, management services agreements, and the like. We also approve the service of disciplinary actions such as complaints. We act as the final arbiter of discipline and have final approval regarding subsequent settlement agreements. Additionally, the board may also hold emergency board meetings to consider urgent matters such as summary suspensions. Cannabis Advisory Commission, also noted before, is tasked with studying issues related to the cannabis industry and making policy and regulatory recommendations to the CCB. This 12-member commission is chaired by myself, the CCB Executive Director, includes 8 representatives appointed by the governor with expertise related to the cannabis industry, in addition to the Nevada Attorney General, the Director of the Department of Public Safety, and the Executive Director of the Department of Taxation, who is in the audience today. Our current subcommittees, we have rescheduling and descheduling, we have a market participation, and we have a public safety and illicit market CAC subcommittee. Additionally, the CAC meets at my direction, similar to the Nevada Gaming Policy Committee. Now, who are we and what do we do? Our 3 main divisions are licensing, inspection and audit, also known as health and safety, investigations, and enforcement. The licensing division processes and reviews license and renewal applications, as well as collects fees. They also manage cannabis agent registration card programs. To give you kind of a round number, there's currently about 20,000 plus active cards and 14,500 plus individuals work in the industry. Additionally, licensing assists the Department of Taxation in collecting cannabis related taxes from licensees. Our inspection and audit division performs audit and inspections of cannabis facilities, tracks and monitors all inventory from seed to sale, and audits monthly and quarterly reports from licensees required by the CCB. They also evaluate all complaints made against the licensed facility, including incident reports. Our investigations and enforcement division review and process transfers of interest for change of ownership requests. They vet potential licensees and affiliated owners, officers, and board members, and that vetting includes a full suite of background checks and financial analyses as part of a required suitability review. Additionally, they partner with local and state law enforcement regarding criminal investigations, including some enforcement on illicit market activity. We oversee 6 different types of licenses. Cultivation, who are licensed to grow, harvest, and package cannabis, and they can sell to cannabis establishments, but not to consumers. Production, they're licensed to purchase cannabis, manufacture, process, and package cannabis and cannabis products, and they can sell to other cannabis establishments, but again, not to consumers. Our retail dispensary license, these are licensed to purchase cannabis and cannabis products from other cannabis establishments, and those are the ones that can sell to consumers. We also oversee testing labs, which are licensed to conduct laboratory tests on cannabis and cannabis products. And we also do distribution licenses, licensed to transport cannabis from one cannabis establishment to another. And lastly, we oversee cannabis consumption lounges. These are licensed to operate businesses for consumption of single-use or ready-to-consume cannabis products on site. Taxable sales. So as you can see, the gray taxable sales reports by adult use cannabis stores and medical dispensaries in fiscal year 24 were $829 million plus. That is a decrease of 2% compared to fiscal year 2023. $43.7 million were collected for the 15% excise tax in fiscal year 2024, and $76.8 million were collected for the 10% state retail tax in fiscal year 2024. As with any industry, the market will dictate demand, and our goal at the CCB is to provide certainty and a fair playing field for the industry to know what's expected of them and to provide stability to withstand any economic downturns. Distributions to the state education fund, very proud of this, $107.8 million. Of that, previously mentioned, $76.8 million came from the excise tax, retail excise tax, excuse me, and then $31 million of that came from, I think my numbers are slightly off, that should actually read $43 million, came from the wholesale cannabis excise tax. Just some quick background, NRS 372A 290 directs all revenue from the 10% state retail cannabis excise tax into the state education fund, formerly the distributive school account. The state wholesale excise cannabis tax revenue collected is transferred to the CCB and used to support the agency's operations and the regulatory oversight of the cannabis industry in Nevada. The CCB also distributes a total of $5 million of the revenue collected from wholesale excise tax to local governments to carry out the provisions of NRS 678C and D. The remaining proceeds are transferred to the SEF by the CCB, along with residuals from civil penalties, licensing, and other fees collected as outlined in statute. Nevada Department of Education is responsible for distribution from the state education fund to the school districts, and those numbers are right, actually. Industry snapshot. So we oversee a total medical and adult use operational licenses statewide of 387. As you would imagine, the highest concentration of operational licenses is in Southern Nevada. There are 260 operational licenses in Clark, unincorporated Clark, Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Henderson, and Mesquite. The second largest, as you would also imagine, is in Washoe. 62 operational licenses in Washoe, unincorporated Washoe, Reno, and Sparks. Breakdown of the operational license types. We have 128 cultivators, 100 producers, 8 independent testing labs, 103 medical dispensaries or retail cannabis stores, 46 distribution facilities, and currently 2 operational consumption lounges. Industry snapshot. So pursuant to NRS 678B 390 and 340, the cost of an agent card is currently $150 per category, and each card is valid for 2 years. Each category, cultivation, production, distribution, dispensary, laboratory, and consumption lounge, requires separate cards at $150 each. CCB receives an average of 1,012 agent card applications monthly, and we issue an average of 902 temporary agent cards monthly, which is a number we're quite proud of because we allow Nevadans to enter or continue to work in the cannabis industry. These are all pending a state and FBI background check, and again, up to this turnaround time, an applicant can expect to receive a temporary agent card to start work within 48 hours. Laws and regulations and our website. So all the rules and regulations governing the CCB can be found on the CCB's website under the Laws and Regulations tab if you'd like to read more. This page also includes Title 56, Nevada Revised Statutes 678A through D, as well as the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Regulations. Also, please note, and I'll address that later, changes from last session, NCCRs are soon to be NACs, and currently those are all broken down by regulation. Current and trending challenges. As mentioned, kind of on the fiscal slide, tax revenue in FY24 was down compared with both FY23 and FY22. Sales revenue, as you would imagine, is also down in 24 compared to FY23 and 22. This decline is consistent with sales trends in other states with mature cannabis markets and can be attributed, at least in part, to after effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Slight downward trend is consistent with the 15% wholesale excise and 10% retail taxes. Additionally, challenges, illicit market, unregulated cultivation, production, and sale of cannabis, and nationwide concerns regarding synthetic cannabinoids. Cannabis market study contracted by the CCB estimates the illicit market size at $242 million, or about 21% of the total cannabis market in Nevada. You may have heard of intoxicating hemp, synthetics, or Delta-8 THC. National concern is growing over these products, which are often sold in smoke shops and gas stations. Please note these are not regulated by the CCB. These are products that are over the allowable legal for hemp. Agency operations and efficiencies. In 2024, we completed White Pine County licensing. 1 cultivation and 1 production license were issued. That was the second licensing round of those types of license in agency history, and I'm also proud to report that they have received their final clearance to open. Additionally, cannabis consumption lounges, as mentioned before, cannabis consumption lounges are expected to open on a rolling basis. 2 are currently open. We acquired a mobile lab in 2024. The CCB enlisted mobile labs to test edibles, plants, concentrates, and infused products in the field. The results take approximately 15 minutes. It's a very, very efficient device, and light labs have already been used to assist law enforcement across the state. And as noted just prior, market study, the CCB conditioned an independent market study as required by NRS 678A 310. Agency operations and efficiencies. So based on the governor's initiative, economic growth, trying to create a business-friendly regulatory environment, public safety, partnering with DPS on illicit market concerns, government support services, recruiting and retention of a talented team, providing outstanding customer service, collaborating with other state agencies, including but not limited to tax, DPS, and agriculture. Office organization, the new supervisory positions approved by the legislature in 2023 in the Audit, Inspection, and Investigations Division improved efficiencies within their divisions. Staff training and improvement. In the interim, the CCB team received numerous trainings and utilized resources inside and outside the agency. We also leveraged trainings from other state agencies and provided numerous trainings to licensees and industry stakeholders. Recruiting and retention. We're exceptionally proud of this number. We believe the CCB is a desirable place to work, creating an innovative and forward-looking agency with a current vacancy rate of only 1%. Audit inspection, also proud to report, teams completed all field work and 100% of licensees were visited in 2024. Regulatory updates: the board, as dictated by the governor's executive order, considered multiple regulation changes which were workshopped and approved by the board in June of 2024. Bill implementations from last session: SB 195. This revamped the provisions relating to disciplinary action taken by the board, including the settlement process for any complaints. It limited civil penalties to a max of $20,000 for any single violation. It also eliminated time and effort billing for our audit and inspection divisions. SB 328, the CCB is no longer exempt from the Administrative Procedures Act. LCB is currently revising the Nevada Cannabis Compliance regulations into the NAC format, as well as all regulatory changes submitted in June of 2024. Also updated the board composition, the terms of office, qualifications, and training of board members, and as well as the executive director appointment. CCB welcomed 2 board members during my tenure thus far, one in January of 2024 with another new member that started, actually I need to update this, that started last week, and he went through successfully all of the training that we implemented based on SB 328. Excuse me. Additionally, SB 277 required the Cannabis Advisory Commission to provide a study and recommendations concerning the potential effects on the Nevada cannabis industry if cannabis were to be removed from Schedule 1 of the Uniform Controlled Substances Act or the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Proud to report that that was submitted on February 29th, 2024 to LCB. Dual licensing: the CCB combined licenses for both medical and adult use, creating one fee for license renewal. Subsequently, all licenses have been combined. Individual sale amount increases, notices sent to industry, and adjustments made to the tracking and inventory system were done. Excluded felonies requires the board to develop and implement a process by which a person who has been convicted of an excluded felony offense may submit to the board a petition for an exemption from those prohibitions. 9 have been submitted in total. 4 were approved with conditions. 3 were, or without conditions, 3 were approved with conditions. 1 did not respond, and 1 has not brought the requested documents back to the board. Issuance and renewal fees: it also decreased the maximum amount of the fees the CCB is authorized to charge for the issuance or renewal of an adult use cannabis establishment license. Secure entrances also authorizes any cannabis establishment to have more than 1 entrance so long as each entrance is secure. Legislative initiatives: so for this session we have 1 bill, AB 76, and we were fortunate enough to have that heard on the 12th in front of Chair Miller and the Assembly Judiciary. Going to continue work with, brought forward a substantive amendment to that bill, continue to work with industry and stakeholders to get that bill in a very good place and hopefully move it forward. So, Chair, with that concludes my prepared remarks. If you have any questions for us.
Thank you so much. Committee members, do we have any questions for the Cannabis Compliance Board? I think we all do. Let's go with Senator Cruz Crawford.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. As a school principal, I really appreciate all the funding that we get from this. I think it's a great showing of taking something that was previously not legal to leveraging it and creating great oversight and consumer protections. My question is in regards to revenue. We want to increase revenue, right? And so one of the big things that I've heard is taking cash instead of card. Do we have any update on that to increase revenue in regard to our cannabis? Is that a correct way of asking that?
Maybe if you can clarify some of the federal regulations and why the certain transactions exist, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, do you mind if I go direct? Excellent. Thank you for the question, Senator. So currently, we're actually only cash. We've set up a few Oh, yeah, that's yeah. So again, we've set up kind of a process that we can accept fees, and I can have Chief Gilbert elaborate on that through some ACH payments. But currently, that is a challenge. Safer Banking Act, which was proposed through at the federal level, made its way through, I believe, the Senate or the Assembly. I can't remember, one of the houses, but unfortunately did not make it through the other. So it is my belief that that would actually be a significant help to the industry nationwide, not just in Nevada, but nationwide, if they were to improve and update some of that ability for these licensees to take different forms of payment.
Senator, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, okay, so yes, I agree, taking card would increase our revenue, which would put more pockets into our public schools. So we don't, that didn't pass, is there a pathway forward, is there any, what's the next steps, do you have any more information on that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Currently, don't have any direct through pass to that, but we'll continue to work with industry to see if there's any potential workarounds that we can make work. Sorry, that was not well phrased, but to see if there's anything we could potentially do to streamline that process.
And then my next question is, I know one of the concerns when we did go to cannabis is, increasing DWIs or DUIs or anything like that. Are you tracking crime and through this cannabis, opening up those doors?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'm actually going to kick that to Chief Cronkite. That doesn't typically fall under our purview, but she may know about some reports that we currently aren't doing but are accessible.
Question, Kara Cronkite for the record. We are not personally tracking that information. I believe law enforcement might be doing that tracking. However, for our consumption lounges, we do require that they have policies in place to deter intoxicating driving. Some of these include no-tow policies, such as not towing when they park overnight if they need to leave their vehicle, or agreements with rideshare companies so that they can use discounts or free rides from the consumption lounges. So they do have some policies in place to deter that behavior, but I think it is law enforcement who would be tracking that information, as we don't receive that.
Thank you, Chair.
Senator Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. I would like to just comment on the decreased tax revenue that you talked about. You attributed the decrease to possibly COVID smoothing out, I presume. But it seems like from fiscal year 22, we're looking at the 15% rate, revenues decreased by almost a third, and $10 million between 23 and 24. Similarly, in the 10% rate, we see obviously smaller, but similar reductions. My question is, you mentioned that there was about $242 million in illicit sales, which represents about 21% of the market. In the other years, did we see that this illicit market was lower or higher? Could the illicit market be taking a little bit more of an active role because of you're not paying taxes on it and it's less expensive, potentially? What is the impact of the illicit market on the decrease in revenue coming to the state?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Specifically, I can't speak to those prior years in exact terms because this was the report that we actually commissioned, but I can refer specifically to that number. And so it's hard to pin down exactly what the illicit market is, and that the study that we commissioned attempted to try to do that. We are aware that it is an issue, and the governor has asked us to work very closely with the Department of Public Safety under Director Tagliati to look into how we can potentially go after those in the illicit market. He's coming forward with a budget ask for additional staff to potentially look at that. Some of those numbers too aren't necessarily attributed specifically to the illicit market, although please don't take that as a deflection of not saying the illicit market's important. But other states have come online as well. So somewhat, I hate to say the novelty or the uniqueness of Vegas having that early adopter advantage when some of these folks can get it in their home state. So the market isn't as robust as it once was, and given the newness and just that people were home during COVID, there was more access, more opportunity, I guess you would say, to consume.
I appreciate it. One more follow-up, if I can. You mentioned we have 2 lounges that are opened up. What has been the history with the lounges as far as enforcement? Has there been a lot of issues? Obviously, being intoxicated and driving coming from a lounge probably is much larger propensity than in other venues. Can you respond to that at all?
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. Again, we have not had any reported incidents, I don't believe, at the lounges themselves from a regulatory standpoint. Again, I can't comment to the numbers if there's been an increase on the DUI or from that aspect. But as Chief Cronkite mentioned, it's certainly something that when we wrote the regulations, we wanted to make sure that it was an option to leave your car and that there were other avenues for people to get home safely. As mentioned in the mission statement, public health and safety is above all else for us. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Steinbeck.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation today. I appreciate that your mission statement stated about the need to protect the public health and public and health of residents and visitors. My question for you is the illicit, unregulated market. It's in the open. I mean, its deliveries are in the open, advertising is in the open. What has to happen to shut that down? I mean, I know I saw also, just a little bit of follow-up that you had the ability to do civil penalties. Are you able to do that on the illicit market as well as those that you regulate?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So we don't actually have, I actually may have Chief Staley come up here and share a little bit of that, share some additional things that we've been able to do which fall under our purview. But speaking to that question, the illicit market, it's highly nuanced. There's many different aspects that you mentioned, illicit delivery, things like that. I've held numerous public roundtables with members from industry to address specifically the illicit market, recognizing it as a problem. Again, under the direction of the governor, working with Director Togliatti at DPS, that is going to be a focus of ours. To look into that to see what we can potentially do. Again, what we're able to do, and there's one fix as well that we actually have in AB 76 that would allow us effectively to go after basically fines and taxes of those that are participating in the illicit market. Let me see, I have a couple more notes on the things so Chief Staley's team has actually been out into the field to go to some of these licensees, or not our licensees, but outside of our jurisdiction, because we currently don't have jurisdiction over the illicit market, so to speak. So to anything unlicensed, we're able to go out with local licensing and sort of get these products off the shelves. And so that probably doesn't address your direct question of the illicit market, but it's, like I said, it's very nuanced and multi-pronged approach. So look into that with Director Togliatti for some guidance on that and how we can partner with him.
Yeah, because it's definitely out of control, and certainly to the public health, right? All the reasons that have been stated about the fact that it doesn't have the same testing, the fact that it gets laced with so many different products as well. It's extremely dangerous, and we're seeing the effects. One more question, please, Chair. Thank you. So a follow-up also to Senator Cruz's question. When it comes to driving under the influence, that's certainly been on the rise quite a bit with it as well. And I was wondering, is there any efforts, and I don't know how effective these would be, but any efforts to have the distribution centers at least educating people that although it's legal, there seems to be an attitude that it's legal to actually drive and consume at the same time or right after. Despite the efforts that are robust at the consumption lounges, that's not the problem, right? The problem isn't the people leaving the consumption lounges. You guys are doing a great job there. It's everywhere else.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Again, this is not something, that we have not already discussed multiple times, working with industry as well. So something we're looking into is that doing PSAs effectively. And not just, again, to respond to, multiple of the questions we've received today, not just to purchase directly from I can't emphasize enough, if you're going to purchase cannabis, please do it from one of our licensees. It's tested, it's vetted. We know that it's as safe as we can possibly make it. And so the follow-up to that then is also working on a PSA campaign. Our communications directors behind me have asked her to please look into that. So that's something that we're certainly going to do. I know it's front of mind for industry as well, and also something we very much want to pursue. So we don't have a very large budget for it, but it's certainly something we will try to do as much as we possibly can within those confines, and hopefully partner with industry as well to do those types of PSAs, both for purchase safe as well as driving DWI.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, now time for my rapid round. I have like a whole full page load. So first question, let's go. I'm going to break it down first in terms of the drive in revenue, as Senator Stone was mentioning. So some of the concerns that I've heard, right, or from the industry folks in my district and so forth, are the overtaxation perhaps of the industry, whether or not that's true, if that is happening or not happening. Obviously, we have the Department of Taxation coming into this. Have you guys, as the Cannabis Compliance Board, do you have the broad authority in terms of the purchasing limits that individuals can purchase? Is that under your purview? And if so, has that been explored in terms of maybe increasing that so tourists can purchase more from these approved sites?
Fantastic question, Chair. Yeah, so limits were increased last session, and then actually in our bill, AB 76, we're aiming to increase those limits as well.
Thank you. So ideally, that would allow us to grow our revenue as well at some point. Okay, so then pivoting more towards the consumption lounges, right? I saw that in your report. About 1/4 of them are from the social equity applications, individuals that perhaps would be more diverse in terms of being the investors of opening these centers because they might not have the same ability to access capital and so forth. And so I want to come back in terms of asking you lessons learned on how we can increase those numbers, right? Because oftentimes it's the whole reason why we added that was there was an industry there was an effort by criminalizing these individuals back before it was legalized. Now that it's been legalized, they should have the opportunity to be the investors of the system that they were criminalized under. And so with consumption lounges, so I'm going to come back to lessons learned from that. But with consumption lounges, right, my understanding is if I wanted to be a consumption lounge, I have to go through the application process of proving that I have enough capital that I'm going to open up a standalone facility. Let's do a different scenario. If I am a restaurant and I want to offer a THC-infused dish as part of my menu, I am not a consumption lounge. I don't want to be a consumption lounge. Are there abilities for me to be that restaurant owner and to apply? Like, am I able to offer that under the current statute or purview right now if I wanted to offer that as a potential enhancement to my delivery of my business?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Kara Cronkite for the record. Currently, the Southern Nevada Health District, Clark County Health Department, and the State Health Department consider THC to be an adulterant. That is per FDA. It is not an allowed ingredient in the food. And so therefore, the local health departments would not allow that. However, if a consumption lounge with a license through us would like to offer restaurant-style service with infused food items, they could do so offering infused and non-infused items and have that same business model.
So just to clarify, for us to be able to for us to have, if we wanted to allow restaurants to offer this to grow the amount of pie that we're getting towards cannabis, there is an opportunity to do so, but it would have to be in requirement in coordination with the health districts, is what it sounds like.
Kara Cronkite for the record. I can't speak on behalf of the health departments. I would assume that they would all have their own rules, but because they do receive federal funding and they hold to FDA standards, I would assume that that's not something they'd be interested in at this time.
Thank you. Next thing, so obviously we talked about purchasing limits. What about cannabis-based businesses that are not consumption lounges? For example, there's obviously different modes of how you consume or apply cannabis or the byproducts of it. An example would be like a business that would be a spa, right? It's not really consuming the cannabis, but you could apply it and so forth. So does that, if I wanted to start a business that did that, do you have the authority already to license me, or would that be a new mode of business that we should consider?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Kara Cronkite for the record. That is something that was considered for the consumption lounge application process. So that is something that they could do through a licensed consumption lounge as like a spa or massage parlor where they apply the topical cannabis on site for the patient or consumer. So even though it's not edible consumption or inhalation consumption, it's considered topical consumption.
And so that's already permitted under the cannabis consumption legislation that we already passed.
Kara Cronkite for the record. Correct, that would be permitted.
What about, okay, I'm trying to give you ideas of like what we can look at. What about music festivals or licensing for special events? Is that a trend that's happening? How can we equip some of the resources or events that are bringing more visitors to come to take application of such? Is that something that you guys are working on?
Kara Cronkite for the record. Currently, events are not permitted through statute. However, if a licensed consumption lounge had a property where they wanted to have a concert or some sort of event and allow the consumption on site at that facility, that is something that we also considered during our regulation drafting for consumption lounges. And they would be able to propose a plan that would include some type of event.
So just to be clear, if I wanted to, for example, host an event at the Speedway in the summertime or in May, for example, I would be able to do so under the provisions of the consumption lounge legislation that was passed.
Kara Cronkite for the record. You would only be allowed to do so if the Speedway was licensed as a consumption lounge. So currently, there are no off-site events that are permitted. That legislation had been proposed last session, I believe, and it did not go through.
I would like to talk offline on how we can fix that. Maybe there's a way that we can find a resolution. Let's go now towards the illicit market. Your slide mentions the unregulated cultivation, production, and sale of cannabis. Do you have any data points on, so there's different parts of the supply chain that it sounds like you're seeing an increase. Where are you seeing the largest increase of complaints? Is it in the cultivation stage? Is it in the sale stage, right? Like, where in the black market are you seeing the biggest complaints that are being referred to you?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Again, that's probably going to be, you're going to be better served with an answer from the local jurisdictions that oversee that. Our complaints typically involve licensees. Did you want to add anything to that?
Kara Cronkite for the record. We have also heard complaints of delivery to the strip properties, to the hotels and casinos where licensees are not able to deliver. I feel like that is a big competitor. And additionally, high potency CBD products that have THC in them, hemp-derived products that are extremely potent, are also readily available online and in smoke shops and other types of facilities around town.
So just now pivoting more towards, and I'm glad you brought that up, pivoting more, of course, towards the synthetic cannabinoids and how I was looking at this particular page that showed like the graphic of like looks like it's like pink and so forth. You mentioned that the Cannabis Compliance Board does not have the authority to go after these types of products. So then the question is, who does have the regulatory authority to monitor and to keep these in compliance? And then I guess the question to that is, I mean, is this under the purview of DHHS or the local health districts to monitor this, or is this regulatory authority that you would like to have because you're working with these individuals? So maybe if you can provide us an idea of what we should look at this session.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Again, we're not here to ask for additional regulatory authority. Again, happy to contemplate any of that, especially if the legislators want to bring that forward. So again, this is multi-pronged, so a lot of people are involved. I'll kind of have Chief Cronkite walk you through it a little bit as well. But given that it's a crop, obviously, and then turned in, it goes from ag to health and HHS, and then comes to us, but only as the regulatory body over Delta-9 THC that you find in our dispensaries, and Chief Cronkite can add a little bit more.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Kara Cronkite. Yes, as the plant is growing, that falls under the Nevada Department of Agriculture. So when it is truly hemp plant, they would regulate that. They do issue hemp handlers permits, and those would be the people who process the hemp and turn them into different products, but they don't regulate those products that they might become. Anything that's a consumable item, I believe, would fall under DHHS for regulation. And then if it does go over the legal limit of 0.3% Delta 9 THC, then it's considered cannabis at that point, and then we would have some authority over it. We do work very closely with the local business licensing divisions because they oversee the business licenses. They have authority to regulate those properties, and we assist them. We physically go into the facilities with them and tell them which products under state law are and are not legal.
Got it. So just to clarify, if there was a product that we saw that looks like it's targeting children or mimicking Fruit Loops or whatever product that is, it would be under your purview as long as it meets the definition of Delta or THC, it would be under your purview to stop and pull those from the shelves and to penalize the licensee. Like, I think it's part of the regulation I'm trying to understand.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So those 387 licensees that I mentioned in the slide, that's all we have purview over. So when we mention licensing divisions from the local authorities, that's us partnering with them for them to go take the intoxicating stuff off the shelves. If there's a report of Fruit Loops or something like that, or some sort of product that's targeting children from one of our dispensaries, then we work with the dispensary to get that off the shelf or repackage based on regulation and based on statute. So I'm sorry if we conflated the two, but it's different when we say state or local licensing. That's with the local licensing authority.
So that in the scenario, if I was a smoke shop that had this product, but I am not licensed under the purview of the Cannabis Compliance Board because I don't sell cannabis, then it sounds like you would work with the local law enforcement authority to pull that off the shelf, and then it would fall into that footstep.
Thank you for the question, Senator. James Hum, for the record. Yes, that is accurate.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions?
No, good.
No? All right. We'll go ahead and conclude this presentation and move over to Department of Taxation.
Thank you so much, Chair, members of the committee.
All right. Next, we have our second presentation for the committee, following the conversation that we just had. The second conversation is with Ms. Hughes, the Executive Director of the Department of Taxation. So they will go ahead and provide more context to some of the questions that we had earlier.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and committee members. My name is Shelley Hughes, Executive Director for the Nevada Department of Taxation. I have with me today Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, Chief Deputy Executive Director, and in the South, Erica Scott, Economist 3 for the department. We will be presenting an overview of cannabis taxes today. Director Hum touched on some of this information in his presentation, but I will briefly go over it again. NRS 372.290 subsections 1 and 2 establishes an excise tax at the rate of 15% of the fair market value at wholesale of cannabis. The tax is the obligation of the cultivation facility and is levied on the first transfer of cannabis from the cultivation facility. The cultivation excise tax is due monthly on the last day of the month after the period ends. The wholesale cannabis tax revenue is distributed to the Cannabis Compliance Board. To provide you with some history regarding the cannabis tax, the medical cannabis tax was established by the legislature in the 2013 legislative session and became effective April 1st, 2014. The tax rate at the time was 2% and was levied on the transfer by a medical cannabis cultivator, product manufacturer, and a dispensary. 75% of that tax revenue was distributed to the state distributive school account, and 25% was distributed to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health to pay the cost to carry out the provisions of NRS 453A. In 2017, the medical cannabis tax was eliminated and the rate was changed from 2% to 15% and was imposed on sales or transfers of cannabis from cultivation facilities. At this time, the Department of Taxation regulated cannabis, and the tax revenue funded the costs of the department and local governments, with any remaining revenue being distributed to the state distributive account. In 2019, the Cannabis Compliance Board, or CCB, was created with Senate Bill 533, and CCB took over the regulation of cannabis. As a result, the distribution of the wholesale cannabis tax revenue changed from being distributed to the Department of Taxation to being distributed to CCB. In 2023, the wholesale cannabis tax was revised to be levied on the first initial wholesale sale at 15% of either the fair market value at wholesale for sales to an affiliate or the contracted sales price for sales to a non-affiliate. NRS 372A.290 subsection 3 establishes an excise tax on the retail sale of cannabis and cannabis products by a retail cannabis store, retail cannabis consumption lounge, and an independent cannabis consumption lounge at the rate of 10% of the sales price. Cannabis or cannabis products sold to a patient cardholder are not subject to the 10% retail cannabis tax. The tax is the obligation of the adult use retail store, retail cannabis consumption lounge, and the independent cannabis consumption lounge, but may be recovered from the purchaser. Retail cannabis taxes are due monthly on the last day of the month after the period ends. The retail cannabis tax revenue is distributed to the State Education Fund. The retail cannabis tax was established in the 2017 legislative session. In 2019, the retail cannabis tax revenue was required to be distributed to the state distributive school account, and then in 2021, the retail cannabis tax revenue was required to be distributed to the newly created State Education Fund. Sales tax is also due on retail sales of cannabis. Retail cannabis stores, retail cannabis consumption lounges, and independent cannabis consumption lounges must also file a monthly sales tax return that includes taxable sales for adult use cannabis and cannabis products and taxable sales to patient cardholders in addition to their cannabis excise tax return. As previously mentioned, NRS 372A.290 subsections 1 through 3 govern the imposition of the cannabis excise tax and the tax rate. In fiscal year 24, the wholesale cannabis tax revenue received by the department was $43,737,147. In fiscal year 24, the retail cannabis tax revenue received by the department was $76,800,162. In fiscal year 24, the taxable sales reported by both adult use retail stores and medical dispensaries was $829,225,194. NRS 678A.480 subsection 1 provides authority to the department to conduct tax audits of cannabis licensees. A licensee shall make available to the department all applicable books, accounts, claims, reports, vouchers, and other records requested by the department in connection with an audit. NRS 678A.480 subsection 5 requires the department in connection with an audit, requires the department along with the CCB to submit to the Director of LCB on or before April 1st of each year a report regarding the audit the agencies conducted the previous calendar year. Specifically, the report includes the number of audits performed, a summary of the finding of the audits, and the cost of each audit. NRS 372A.290 subsections 4 through 7 govern the distribution of cannabis tax revenue. In fiscal year 2024, the department distributed $43,737,147 to the CCB from the wholesale cannabis tax. From that amount, CCB deducts its cost to support its regulatory oversight of the cannabis industry. CCB then distributes $5 million to local governments, and then the remaining amount is distributed to the State Education Fund. In fiscal year 2024, CCB distributed $31,790,460 from this amount to the State Education Fund. The department also distributed retail cannabis tax revenue to the State Education Fund in the amount of $76,800,162. I will now turn the presentation over to Chief Deputy Navarez Goodson.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Doñate, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Yvonne Navarez Goodson, Chief Deputy Executive Director for the Department of Taxation. I would like to present the few slides regarding the role of the Department of Taxation in cannabis license renewals and transfers of interest. I will also provide an overview of Senate Bill 41, which is going to require cannabis tax permits, which will be presented to this committee later in the legislative session. Cannabis license renewals are governed by the Cannabis Compliance Board pursuant to NRS Chapter 678B, which calls for annual renewals of these licenses. Moreover, the CCB Regulation 5.095 governs renewals and states that the failure of a licensee to comply with the provisions of NRS Chapter 372A, which governs cannabis taxes, may result in denial of a renewal. Regarding timing, if a licensee has not renewed a license by the expiration date, the licensee must cease operations and has 90 days to renew the license, or it is deemed to have been voluntarily surrendered. By way of summary, the CCB has existing regulations governing disciplinary actions that may impact licensees, including renewals. The CCB is currently undertaking efforts to adopt certain changes to these regulations, including those that impact duties related to tax obligations with the Department of Taxation. Specifically, under existing CCB regulations, a licensee must operate with all required permits, pay taxes to the department, and file monthly tax and sales reports or payments to the department. Failure to satisfy these tax obligations results in various categories of violations and resulting consequences, including potential suspension and revocation of a license. These violations would similarly impact renewals. The CCB is proposing to amend each of these violations related to tax issues and create a new, less serious violation for failing timely to pay taxes or file returns, which penalties would decrease from civil penalties and potential suspension or revocation to written warnings, significantly decreased civil penalties, and minor suspensions. Under existing CCB Regulation 4.035, a person may become ineligible to receive, renew, or maintain a license to operate a cannabis establishment for operating without all required permits, intentionally failing to pay taxes to the department, or failing to properly collect taxes. Any of these violations are categorized as a Category 1 violation with significant civil penalties up to $90,000, 30-day suspensions, and ultimately revocations. Under proposed revisions to this regulation, the violation for operating without a required permit would move from a Category 2 violation and also include any tax permits. Such violation has decreased penalties from a Category 1 violation, which reduces civil penalties to a maximum of $20,000 with a sliding scale for suspension or revocation depending on the number of violations within 3 years. Notably, this proposed revision eliminates from a violation as a Category 1 or 2 violation the intentional failure to pay taxes and failure to properly collect taxes. As will be noted later, the violations being eliminated under these categories related to intentional failure to pay taxes or properly collect taxes will be categorized together for failing to timely pay taxes or file returns, which will be a much reduced Category 7 violation. Under existing CCB Regulation 4.050, a licensee may be deemed to be creating a threat to public safety and welfare, including unintentionally failing to pay taxes to the department, resulting in a Category 3 violation with a sliding scale of civil penalties from $10,000 to $90,000 and a sliding scale for the number of days of suspension from 10 to 60 days and revocation for 5 or more violations in 3 years. Under the proposed revisions to this regulation, a Category 3 violation would become Category 4 violations, resulting in less severe penalties with a sliding scale of civil penalties from $5,000 to $20,000 instead of the $10,000 to $90,000, and lesser suspension days down to 10 to 20 days. However, the unintentional failure to pay taxes will be removed from a Category 3 or 4 violation altogether under these proposed changes, and again, as noted below, the violation will be categorized into the more streamlined category for failing to pay timely or file tax returns, which will be, again, that Category 7 violation. Under existing CCB Regulation 4.060, a licensee may be deemed to be engaging in conduct inconsistent with the orderly regulation, sale, or production of cannabis, including failing to submit monthly tax or sales reports or payments, resulting in a Category 5 violation with a warning all the way to a sliding scale of civil penalties from $2,500 to $40,000 and a sliding scale number of days of suspension from 3 to 20 days. Under the proposed revisions to this regulation, a Category 5 violation would become a Category 6 violation, resulting again in less severe penalties with a sliding scale of civil penalties between $1,500 and $10,000 instead of the $2,500 to $40,000, and the lesser suspension days down to no suspensions or a 20-day suspension with a 6th violation or more within 3 years. However, once again, the failure to submit monthly tax reports or payments will be removed from this Category 5 or 6 violation altogether and will be categorized again with the streamlined category under a Category 7 with much less of a violation. So as mentioned above, any prior regulations that are resulting in various categories of violations for the differing tax obligations with the Department of Taxation that would have resulted in higher category violations from CCB are proposed to be amended and treated as a single streamlined category for failing timely to pay taxes or file returns as a Category 7 violation. Under this new Category 7 violation, such failure to timely pay taxes or file returns could result in much less severe violations to a licensee, including at least 2 formal written warnings followed by a sliding scale of civil penalties for the 3rd to 6th violations between $1,500 and $10,000 with no suspension, or $20,000 and a 10-day suspension for a 7th or subsequent violation. So again, under this new Category 7 violation that is proposed, again, it's not effective, failure to pay taxes would not result in revocation of a license. Under this next slide, I would like to touch briefly on what is becoming more commonplace activity for cannabis licensees, which is the transfer of interest of these licenses. NRS 678B.380 provides that licenses are not transferable except as provided by regulation of the Cannabis Compliance Board. CCB's regulations 5.110 and 5.112 provide requirements for transferring all or a portion of ownership interest in a cannabis business. The Department of Taxation becomes involved in these transfers of interest where there is an outstanding tax liability by a person or entity seeking to transfer its license, which most often occurs around the time of renewal. As indicated above, for a license to be renewed, the licensee must be timely on their tax obligations. In accordance therewith, if a person or entity seeks a transfer, the department may enter into a conditional transfer of interest with the licensee and the Cannabis Compliance Board to ensure the payment of all outstanding excise taxes through the sale or transfer of proceeds, including requiring proceeds from any sale or transfer to be put into escrow for the department. The department reserves the right to pursue responsible persons and successor liability on outstanding tax liabilities through these transfers for non-payment through these agreements. And it is in the interest of the licensee to pay the outstanding tax obligation or settle the debt to allow the renewal of the license to occur to the new owner. Turning now to an overview of Senate Bill 41, which will be presented to the committee at a future date, I wanted to provide a highlight of the intention of this bill. The bill would require sellers of cannabis or cannabis product to obtain a cannabis tax permit from the department in addition to a seller's permit as applicable. As provided earlier in my presentation regarding the renewals of licenses, a licensee must maintain all required permits for renewal of the license. A cannabis business must renew its license on an annual basis with the Cannabis Compliance Board, and to qualify for renewal of the license must be current with all tax obligations with the Department of Taxation, including filing returns and remitting payments. Business entities that enter into a payment plan under certain circumstances also may pay outstanding tax liabilities. At times, cannabis businesses fail to submit the required tax returns and pay tax liability owed to the state. Alternatively, often cannabis businesses will enter into a payment plan with the department in order to renew its license with the Cannabis Compliance Board and default on the payment plan immediately thereafter. Upon renewal of the CCB license, the business is allowed to operate for another year and may continue to accumulate huge debt to the state. The Department of Taxation has no ability to stop the tax liability from continuing to accrue for another year after the CCB license has been renewed. And many cannabis businesses have ended up going into receivership, and the state loses out on the revenue. By requiring cannabis businesses to obtain a cannabis tax permit from the department to operate in Nevada, the department can have a role in protecting the state's revenue outside of the annual renewal process. Specifically, by requiring cannabis businesses to obtain a cannabis tax permit from the department to operate in Nevada, the department can initiate a hearing or suspension or revocation of the permit with an administrative law judge or a hearing officer when a business becomes non-compliant with its tax obligations. The business entity may appeal an adverse decision of a hearing officer to the Nevada Tax Commission, and any adverse decision of the Tax Commission is subject to judicial review. If the hearing decision or decision of the Nevada Tax Commission supports revocation or suspension, this bill would provide for the automatic suspension of the cannabis license by the Cannabis Compliance Board to prevent that business from continuing to operate and establishing more debt to the state. Once the business becomes into compliance with the department, the CCB would lift the suspension. The business would pay the full tax liability or enter into a payment plan for the full tax liability before it may petition for judicial review. This requirement is consistent with petitions for judicial review of any other commission decision pursuant to NRS 360.395. The process would be similar to the state sales tax permit process. However, the department would not charge a fee for this cannabis tax permit. With that, Mr. Vice Chair, I'd like to turn it over to our economist, Erica, who is down in Southern Nevada.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Erica Scott, S-C-O-T-T. I will be beginning on slide 17 and discussing the fair market value. Fair market value is the median sales price for wholesale sales between cannabis cultivation facilities and cannabis establishments that are not affiliates, often referred to as arm's length transactions. The fair market value calculation was prepared by the Department of Taxation semi-annually in the past, but beginning January 1st of 2023, this process was changed to a quarterly calculation. In addition, taxation has implemented a process to post the fair market value memo around the middle of the month prior to the effective date for industry to be able to view. And fair market value is posted to the Department of Taxation's website at tax.nv.gov. The data used to calculate fair market value is often directly or is obtained directly from the state seed to sale tracking system called Metric. These are transactions reported in Metric directly by cannabis industry. In the past, taxation used the wholesale transfer initial first report in Metric, which details all first initial wholesale sales of cannabis as input by industry, with some methodology to find the non-affiliate transactions. But beginning January 1st of 2024, upon passage of Assembly Bill 430, the non-affiliate wholesale transfer initial first metric report was created and able to be used. Each quarter, the fair market value, along with the summary statistics, is published on the department's website. However, it is possible to request additional information regarding fair market value calculations and methodology by submitting a public records request form found on the department's website, but also keeping in mind no request which includes identifying taxpayer information would be granted pursuant to NRS 360.255. I'd like to review the department's methodology for calculating the fair market value by steps. So the first step is that the data is pulled directly from Metric by way of the non-affiliate wholesale transfer first report, as stated earlier. The report dates used are for the prior completed 3 months of business transactions. So for example, the January 1st of 2025 calculation was completed in December by the department and consisted of transactions from September 1st of 2024 through November 30th of 2024. The second step is the data cleaning, in which any transaction that was not in an accepted status by the purchaser would be eliminated from the data set. Additionally, all packages with the status of all packages with the status of rejected or returned or still awaiting acceptance, showing as a shipped status for longer than 3 business days, are all eliminated from the data set. Only those transactions with an accepted status are used. Also eliminated from the data set are transactions of samples, testers, displays, all typically called quote-unquote penny transactions, any R&D transactions, and tribal that are, and any known affiliate transactions that by error are showing up in this transfer type. Essentially, any transaction that would not be considered a typical arm's length transaction is going to be eliminated from the data set. Step 3 is we separate out the categories. So there are 8 fair market value cannabis categories that the wholesale cannabis tax is due upon. So that would be flower, trim, small bud, whole wet plant, immature plants, pre-rolls, flower approved for extraction, and trim approved for extraction. The next step is to standardize the price by weight. So for each cannabis category, we divide the shipped dollar amount by the weight shipped for all weight-based categories. And since the immature plant category is in units, divide the shipped dollar amount by the count of plants shipped. Flower, trim, small bud, wet, whole plants, pre-rolls, flower approved for extraction, and trim approved for extraction are all valued by the pound, while only immature plants are valued by the individual unit. Step 5 is to remove any remaining outliers, and to do this, we remove any records that with a standardized price less than 15% of the previous fair market value, or more than 500%. Sales made for less than 15% of the previous fair market value are sold for less than the actual tax that would have been due on the product, and as such would not be considered an arm's length transaction. And sales made for more than 500% of the fair market value are likely special cases or keying errors that should not impact the fair market value determination. Then we run the descriptive statistics for each cannabis category using the data analysis in the analysis tool pack in Excel. We run the descriptive statistics tool on the standardization price field to include the summary statistics. And finally, we determine the new fair market value as it is determined to be the median sales price from the summary statistics after all the prior adjustments of the data have been made. And the department prepares the memo and posts it to the website. The goal of the department is to publish the new fair market value rates to the website by mid-month prior to the effective date in an attempt to give as much advance notice as possible to cannabis industry of the current upcoming fair market value price structure. And with that, we conclude this presentation by providing the department's contact information, along with our very helpful website where all of those documents can be found at tax.nv.gov. And we thank you for your time allowing us to present today and are available for any questions.
So much. Committee members, do we have any questions at this time? Senator Stone.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious, what is the incidence of Category 1 or Category 2 violations, let's say in the past year?
For the record, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, Chief Deputy for the Department of Taxation. Senator Stone, on that question, I might actually defer to the Cannabis Compliance Board as they would be tracking the number of violations for any licensee.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Sorry, I thought it was just the opening act, but I will try to help. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we can absolutely get them for you, Senator.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I'm ready to ask my next question because I'm assuming it's going to be a back and forth, so you might as well just stay there. Are we seeing an increase in tax violations of folks not filing or not being aware? I mean, we spent a large portion of today talking about the illicit black market. So are you seeing that also on the receiving end from the Department of Taxation?
Shelley Hughes for the record. Thank you for that question. Actually, taxation does not have any authority for illicit sales. We do not have any authority to collect excise tax. I know that you have a bill that will be coming before you in regards to this, and Director Hum may be able to add a little bit to it, but I think that that language will include the ability for us to be able to impose tax on those illicit sales.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I can't remember the way we've couched it, if it's a tax or a penalty, but we included that in our updated regs. And so once those get through the Leg Commission, and then if our bill gets passed, we needed to actually ask, LCB recommended that we ask for that authority because we don't currently have that authority, so that is in our bill now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any suggestions or anything that you would like to say? I know we talked about the decline in revenue from tax collections. Is there any comments or anything you wanted to say in addition to what was presented earlier?
Shelley Hughes for the record. I think Director Hum did a great job explaining, I mean, with his study that he had conducted, they went into detail about the reduced that state of Nevada could look at. And one of them, I think, was taxing illicit sales.
Great, thank you so much. Any other comments? Senator Steinbeck.
Thank you, Chair. My question would be, if we were to, through legislation, give you additional authority or additional purview over the illicit markets, would you have the staff for enforcement?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I believe that we would, specific to what we just mentioned. We have the ability to hire a few additional post officers right now, but then additionally, specific to what Director Tagliati would do, that would be a different kind of classification. This would be more specific to collecting fines or effectively taxes on the illicit market. So I believe we would have that staff currently, but Director Tagliati would need additional staff.
Okay, and one follow-up. Those fines or taxes that you would collect, would they be distributed in the same manner as the rest of the revenue?
Thank you for the question, Senator. That is correct. It would go into to our fund, and then anything additional would be distributed out to the state education fund.
Thank you. And do you have any projections yet as to what you could capture from? I know you have the bill in process, but have you done any preliminary adjustments as to what you could potentially pull if you were given that authority?
Record, I'm not sure if we have that information. I could look to our economist. I don't know if she's had an opportunity to look into that.
And while she's pulling it up, I'm assuming that the challenges that we're facing, your colleagues in other states that have also legalized this are also facing the similar challenges, and so that's probably why you're bringing forth some of these changes, because I mean we are one of the early adopters, and so I don't know if there's any preliminary data that you have pulled or you could model for us, but.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for the question. Erica Scott for the record. I don't have any hard figures at this time. I know trying to bill illicit market there is some doubt as to collectability on the other end of that. So it gets a little tricky. From the portions of the illicit market that we think is the transactions that are going on, we could come up with estimates as far as what could be billed, although collection-wise and resulting revenue, I don't have statistics on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the question was more so, do we know the magnitude of the illicit market? And if we were even to take a finite share of it, like what does that look like, right? And so it was more of, have you seen the data points or what you presume to be the data points of what the illicit market looks like based on the complaints that you're receiving? And if you were to get even a slice of that, what it would look like? And that's why I was asking more so about the authority to go after those individuals and so forth, so.
Thank you for the question.
Sorry, Erica, are you going to answer that?
Yes, Erica Scott for the record. I know taxation does not have any illicit market kind of statistics on that, but the Cannabis Compliance Board market study showed a trending downward of the illicit market figures.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yeah, I would just say we would rely on the market study for that. We would have to look at to see, I guess, if it was a one-to-one. But again, to Director Hughes's point, collectability would be a challenge. Again, I think we have the staff to certainly look at that, but I don't know if, we issue a citation, if it's necessarily going to spur anyone in the illicit market to pay that citation.
Yep, fair enough. Great. Do we have any other final questions? Senator Cruz Crawford? I think I inspired more questions. And then Senator Steinbeck.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my question is, do you have programs in place to help the illicit market go into the legal market so that when they are fined, there's a pathway or mentorship or counselor to get them into compliance?
Thank you for the question, Senator. We have discussed, obviously, the, illicit legacy to legal is more of the way that that's couched. Currently, it's open to licensees if they would like to contract with people. We review those management services agreements and things like that, but there's no direct through path. We don't have any licensing rounds open. So for anyone to kind of come into that, the through path would be through the market, as mentioned in SB 277, whereas we can get people, agent cards so they can actively work in the industry outside of those excluded felonies after board approval, but no specific licensees or licenses are available.
Senator Steinbeck.
Thank you, Chair. Final question from me is if those fines or fees, if they're not paid, is there a criminal penalty?
Thank you for the question, James Hum, for the record. Let me actually check with I don't want to give bad advice or incorrect advice, so let me actually check with our DAGs, Deputy Attorney Generals, to see what the recourse would actually be.
Now Senator Steinbeck he gave me an idea for a question. In other industries, not in cannabis related, if I were not to pay my taxes as a business owner, say if I was a smoke shop and obviously I'm selling cigarettes, are there not civil penalties but criminal penalties if I fail to pay my taxes on time and so forth? So not cannabis, but are there other sectors where there is a case study for that to be made?
Shelley Hughes for the record. So taxation regulates both tobacco and liquor. For our tobacco licensees, if they do not pay their tax obligations, they are not able to renew their license the following year, and their license are renewed yearly. So it's similar to how we are with the CCB. Now, for illicit sales, is that what you're looking for? So for illicit sales, we do go in and we seize what we consider contraband because the tax is not paid on those tobacco products, and they are not allowed to operate in Nevada. They are given fines and penalties, and our DAGs would represent them in criminal matters, or represent us in the criminal matter.
But at that point, you would work with the local jurisdiction and local law enforcement to shut them down for failure to obtain proper business licensing mechanisms, et cetera, or whatever. There's already repercussions for that, or avenues for it, essentially.
Shelley Hughes for the record. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other last minute questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for presenting. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to move on to the last agenda item, which is public comment. So if there's any folks that would like to provide public comment here in Carson City or Las Vegas, we ask for folks to come forward. Seeing none here or in Las Vegas, AVH, is there anyone online?
Chair, the public line is open. However, there are no callers.
Thank you so much. That concludes the business of today's meeting. We will be meeting on Thursday to hear from RTC and the DMV, and so we look forward to welcoming folks to that. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.